Prometheus was punished for eternity for giving fire to humans. The gods tied him to a mountainside and punished him for eternity. And the AI is like fire, that we've been given fire. So if you're asking me, like, will AI support actors? Probably not. How do you use a fire? If you just let a fire run rampant in your home, it's going to burn the place down. But if you put it in the fireplace, it'll keep you warm. If you put it in an oven, it'll cook your food. Um, so it's something to be handled with care and to be taken seriously. And I think it's more like a weapon of art, to be honest.
Mhm.
Um, and that should be used with a lot of consideration.
How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a nice day in LA, the end of summer, drinking some coffee, ready for a chat about art.
Nice.
Well,
And you live in LA since a long time, or when did you move there?
yeah, I moved here 13 years ago, and I've had my green card for 10 years, and
Okay.
I moved out here for the film industry, and been having fun amongst the palm trees and the sunshine and Sunset Boulevard, the whole thing.
Nice. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I'm very happy to chatting with you because, as you said, you are part of the film industry, and you balance your time between films and creating digital art. So that's
Mhm.
quite interesting. And that is a very exciting topic these days, which is the Hollywood strike, which I guess
Yeah,
you are familiar with. And I'm very very interested in that topic because I've been reading about it. And I think today there was some sort of resolution. They came to an agreement.
really.
Um, that's what
I
I was
haven't
reading,
seen it.
but it's like I read that like a couple of hours ago. Um, but can you tell us, Lawrence, what's happening? What is this strike about, and how is it affecting the film industry in general?
I mean, the strike was for coming for a long time. It was about the way that royalties were getting paid out by streamers. I mean, it used to be that you did an episode of a TV show and you would keep getting royalties for years to come, and they would be pretty good. They would be more than what you got paid for being there. And when the streamers took over, they completely changed the business model, and there was no royalties basically being paid out. So it was significantly less money that creatives were getting paid, like actors and writers. Um, and the streamers were just keeping that for themselves and their corporation, and not paying out the creatives. So it was
Mm.
a stand for creatives and artistic work within the film industry. And also, there was some contentious topics about AI too. I think the studio was trying to, um, they were trying to, get around by, scanning people. But in particular, they were just starting to try and scan extras, right? And then sort of work them into the AI algorithm, and then just scan them one time, and then they could use them in perpetuity forever, which is not. I mean, you can't do that. You can't just own someone forever and probably not pay them very much for it. Um, so they put a stop to that. But I mean, it was interesting because it brought up a lot of different topics about AI and working with AI in our day. Because I think AI is such a new concept for a lot of people, and particularly outside of digital art. We're maybe more accustomed to talking about it, and we've seen the evolution of it. Having paid attention to digital art for the last few years, we've seen how far it's progressed, and different ways of working with it, and the different programs and how to use them. And but a lot of people haven't seen that. They haven't seen a ton of AI images um, either, even though there's accounts popping up all the time, some of which I think are interesting, and you know, but the point is, it's a new thing for people. Um,
Mm.
so the way in which to talk about what AI is and its different uses is being brought up to the surface. Um, and it's a slow process of, I think, educating everybody as well, because it's not going away. Uh, it's not going to slow down, stop, or disappear because people are afraid of it. That's not how reality will work. It will continue to progress. And as long as we are, as creatives, on top of it and working with it, um, I mean, not everyone, not all creatives have to work with AI if they don't want to, but I think, guiding it in the right direction. Because we're here now, and in the future, a lot of these things will just be what's been established by us. Um, so it's important that we're sort of the bastions of ethical use of AI, which I do think is a possible, um, and working with technology so that we don't all eventually become cyborg robots uh, in some sort
Yeah,
of Star Wars dystopian future.
right, right. And I mean, what you're mentioning, you're right that probably in the digital art space, we are kind of used to it by now because we have seen the evolution over the past 2 years. How, I mean, it's been around for more time, but I think we started to see AI art more regularly over the past 2 years. And then over the past year, with all the progress, it has been like Midjourney, all these tools that you can actually create different kind of images very quickly. It's like an explosion, but we have been seeing it for some time. But when it comes to other industries, I have a friend that is a lawyer, and when he discovered ChatGPT, and then he was crazy, like, wow, this can actually create contracts. Like the things that it's taken me like a couple of days, I can get a template that is 95% accurate
Mm,
in a couple of minutes.
yeah,
And yeah, you're right that in other professions, people aren't that familiar with it. And also what you said about scanning actors. That there is an episode right on Black Mirror
yeah.
about this with Salma Hayek, and it's funny because I think that that episode was recorded maybe 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, but the industry already saw it coming, right?
Mm.
And when it comes to AI in acting, Lawrence, do you see it supporting actors and directors in different ways, and not necessarily like scanning yourself, but in other ways, like to learn, to study, to improve your practice as an actor? Have you seen any of that?
We were having a bit of this discussion with um, my collaborator Vincent D'Onofrio in Twitter Space the other day, and the interesting idea was brought up about Prometheus. Prometheus was punished for eternity for um, giving fire to humans. The gods tied him to a mountainside and punished him for eternity. And the AI is like fire. We've been given fire. So if you're asking me, like, will AI support actors? Probably not. How do you use a fire? If you just let a fire run rampant in your home, it's going to burn the place down. But if you put it in the fireplace, it'll keep you warm. If you put it in an oven, it'll cook your food. Um, so it's something to be handled with care and to be taken seriously. And I think it's more like a weapon of art, to be honest.
Mm,
Um, and that should be used used with a lot of consideration. Like, I've scanned myself for different pieces, and I've scanned Vincent um, for a couple collabs that we've done. But I would never like use the likeness of another actor without it being like a collaboration,
mm,
um, without it being their direct involvement, and and that goes for you know say living artists and things like that. I mean, yeah, the references I use are classical references or in the public domain too. So it's a bit like being a collage artist in that way. And I've always been pretty considerate if I've used any other sort of any other poetry as well, which I have done in some of my early works, that it's been poetry that was in the public domain. It was published
mm,
before 1925.
mm.
Um, and if I've used any music, it's been licensed, uh, things like that. I think all those ethical and frankly legal um, uh, situations are really important to the whole dynamic. So, do I think it will support actors and directors? I think actors and directors can use it as a very powerful um, tool and weapon of art.
Yeah, that's right, but it needs to be done ethically and with people's consent. And that's a good point you brought about using for your art, things that were in the public domain. I think there is a big difference there when you take poetry, music, images as well that are openly available. That makes it kind of, I don't know if the word is correct or right, but at least legally is right.
Yeah.
And And Lawrence, I mean, we started talking a bit about the strike, and you have been an actor for a decade now. Yeah, I was looking at you have an amazing, let's call it, history of films, but also TV shows and shorts. But what I'm very, very interested about is your take or your perspective, or how do you balance, being an actor and being a digital creator? Because I've followed you for I think 2 years now, and you are super active, if not one of the most active, artists in the space. In a collector as well. You are also going to many events, going to exhibitions. So how do you balance, getting into films, trying for roles, and when you have a role, which I guess takes several months or maybe a year, and creating art? How do you balance that, Lawrence?
Well, the last role I did was David Hockney on HBO, which came out last year. Um, and that had a wonderful tie into our world as well, because obviously David Hockney is an iconic painter, and he's done a lot of digital art too, but just not any NFTs. Um, and it was actually fun going to set and showing people the art collaborations that I was doing, and I think everyone was pretty interested in. Also, the fact that David Hockney was my late father's one of his best friends. They would talk all the time.
Mm,
Every week they would talk on the phone. Um, and that was just a fun time. The director found out after I'd gotten
mm.
the job, and we were discussing in rehearsals different references. He was sending me like David Hockney documentaries and stuff, and I was like, "Well, what about this one? The interview with my father?" And he was like, "What?" he, he definitely felt good that he'd made an interesting casting choice. That was cool. So, and I think early in my acting career, I actually graduated drama school 17 years ago. But early on, I made a lot of independent films
Mm,
and dived into, um, yeah, I was sort of like as active as I am in the digital art world, I was that active in the independent film world. And I would go around to film festivals and support and champion other filmmakers and actors, and also the films that I had in those festivals. And I was considered sort of an indie darling of that world. Um, but I mean, so much has changed in the film industry from where it was. And if you had like a hit independent film, um, 20, 30 years ago, it would catapult you to the next level. Um, and now I think you can build up a catalog of like 10 knockout independent films that are championed by critics and win awards at festivals, and still the studios don't even blink it. Like, it's
mm,
still the independent film world, I think, is purely something that people do for the love of cinema, and I absolutely love that, and I've done, I don't know, countless independent films, and for, like we were talking about, over 15 years.
mm,
But there does come a point, I think, where if you build up enough of an oeuvre, where you can kind of sit back a bit and just see, I'd be happy if I died tomorrow with some of the roles that I've done, and for that to be a part of my artistic legacy as an actor. Um, so yeah, I can, I have my agent, and I have a manager, and I have interest from, Hollywood is actually coming and knocking on my door a bit now with some of the people I'm
mm,
working with in digital art. So I don't need to chase it as much, which does free up a lot of my time to chase digital art then instead,
mm.
which, gave up chasing one thing to chase another. But yeah, it's coming to me a bit more, which is great, and I can kind of pick my spots and really be considered about my next move. And yeah, so I
Yeah,
do manage to fit it all in. Yeah.
that sounds interesting. So, thanks to digital art, you made some connections that actually helped you to get interest from the film industry. And How did that happen? Like going to exhibitions, going to shows, or just by your online presence, they approached you, or how did that happen through digital art?
So if someone is very established at one particular thing,
Mhm.
it's hard to get to them for that thing. Like it's so I'm what I think a lot of people know I'm working with Vincent D'Onofrio right now, who's one of my favorite actors of all time. And even with everything he's done, I still think he's underrated. Right now, he's Kingpin in Marvel Universe, but his career kicked off because of Stanley Kubrick and Full Metal Jacket, which will always go down as one of the most iconic films in history. His work in The Cell was just so transformative, and should have won an Oscar for it. But if I'd approached Vincent with an acting role, um, like for a film role, there would have been so many considerations that he had to take in mind. It would have had to go through his agent, his manager. They would want a certain financial upfront. Um, yeah, you have to reach a very high level before even having that conversation with someone like Vincent. Um, but because this is cutting edge digital art, new, uh, and what I noticed, and this was key to the whole relationship and how it unfolded, was that he's been a passionate poet for I don't know, like 20 years or more. And he posts his poetry on his timeline all the time, every day. He writes poetry every day. And he's published a book of his poetry. Um, it was a huge passion of his, as much as it is mine. Um, and so, you know, wanting to work on his poetry was something that was for him not being as um, established as a poet necessarily. Although I think his poetry is probably more widely read because of his platform than a lot of the full time poets out there. Um, and I think Vincent is becoming more acknowledged as a poet as this goes on. But my point is, working on his poetry was a way to open that dialogue that I think he was a lot more open minded to than if I'd approached him with a film role.
Mm.
Um, and his genuine passion and desire to participate in the arts, which you can see, in a lot of the theater roles he's done, and a lot of the independent work he's done, and also as a spoken word poet. I actually flew to New York to watch him perform his poetry in a theater in New York called Joe's Pub, which is something he's been doing, I think, for a long time, for like 15 years or something. Um, so and I think this is true of humans throughout history. If someone's very established at one thing, look for what their passion is. If someone is like a really accomplished novelist, then you want to get to know them better. You might find that they're a budding violinist as well,
Yeah.
um, and they're pretty good at the violin. It's just something that they don't get all the attention for that they would like to necessarily. But if you can help them do that, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there is a bigger chance that yeah they pay attention to you because you share something in common. That's very very interesting. And when did you start, Lawrence, writing poetry? Is this something that you have been doing as long as you've been acting, or is something new? When did you actually start writing?
Um, Started writing poetry. It came out of my acting journals. It came out of stream of consciousness, um, and character backgrounds, and basically just sort of it's called emotional journaling in method acting, where you just
Mm,
write everything out. Out of it, I started to connect, I think, to a part of myself that was very deep down, that was like in a dream state, that was very subconscious, and seeing how those symbols and language affected me emotionally was a part of the method acting process. And also, when I read them back after some years, I realized that there was something there. I could shape it into something more. I could take that prose and turn it to poetry, and that I was also sort of pulling out classical references from my work in Shakespeare, and my love of the Romantic poets, and actually poetic language and visual art was helping me get deeper into the process of method acting, and helping me and inspiring me as a writer too. Around this time, it was I don't know, it was a while ago, some years ago. I started writing this screenplay about my late father, who was a notorious art critic. He passed when I was 3, so I never got to know him as a man. So I wanted to. I always heard he was such a fascinating character. He was so sort of dynamic, and they would get him on TV to debate about art all the time. And he had his own magazine, Modern Painters. With there we go. I've got some.
Nice.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, and this about half this bookshelf is the books from his books written
So
by
he
him
was
or his libraries.
an art he was an art critic and a writer as well, right?
Yeah, he was, and he wrote 15 books on art. And
Wow.
so this was his first book. Here's a good one. Okay, so and I've read all of these back to front numerous times over. This was um, Fuller's Modern Painters. It was a collection of his articles that were from the Modern Painters magazine, because that was such it was such an iconic magazine in the art world in England, because it went deeper and further and was more hard hitting than basically any art magazine that was around at the time, or that had been put out for a long time, and arguably since. I mean, much of art criticism can said to have been basically just um, sort of receded back into its sort of sleepy uh, status quo, and that it's not as hard hitting and it's not as controversial as it used to be.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe there's different reasons for that. Commerce and mass media has a lot to do with that. A lot of
Yeah.
magazines now are kind of glossy magazines, like fashion magazines
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And the state of art writing isn't really being challenged like he challenged it. The state of art. He would look at other critics' articles, and he would really dig into them and find what the problems were with them. That's why he was such a brilliant debater. Um, and such like a naughty figure. Like, he would show up to lectures and stuff and start sort of heckling from the audience, and it's
Hmm.
quite funny listening back to some of those recordings. Um, so, and I don't know that that's necessarily appropriate now, or it's such like an unconventional approach. I think that it was very specific to him. Um, so I wanted to write this screenplay about him and find out about him, and so I went to his archive at the Tate Museum and digitized a lot of stuff, and worked with them to, and they helped me do that and gave me the time, and we pulled out everything. He had boxes of letters to like David Hockney, other writers of the time, um, gallerists, and it was actually really enlightening to see all that, and to see his letters and to see all his articles and to read through his books so many times over, to find out basically the secrets of where of what was going on in his world, because he was
Hmm.
really at the center of the contemporary art movement that was going on in England. That was, when galleries were popping up all over Soho in the late '60s. He was there. He was going to all the openings. He was at Angela
Hmm.
Flower's first openings, and he was at Casman's openings when Casman was launching David Hockney, and he was um, he lived in the basement of David Hockney's boyfriend, which is how they met when he was like
Hmm.
19, 20, and starting to first get his first jobs as a writer and things like that, just trying to make his way. And David Hockney would come over all the time, and that's how they met and started talking. So, um, he was just a part of the culture, and I think that's also what has inspired me to try and participate in the digital art culture as much as well, seeing what came out of it, the adventures that you can have. Because it's one big adventure that we're all sort of um, participating in. You find your own adventure. It's great fun. But yeah, so writing the screenplay about him, um, I won a number of awards for that screenplay just recently, um, and it was passed around Hollywood a bit, and uh, I was presented an award by Shane Black, who wrote Iron Man series, and so it's still, I've still got it in my back pocket. There's still a lot of interest in it. And maybe now is a good time to look at making it actually, because
Mm,
a lot of producers, this was a couple of years ago, a lot of producers were like, why would we talk about art now? Why now? Like, this is a fascinating
mm,
story. It's well written. Why now? And I think a lot of the reasons as to why now has changed and elevated, and the discussions about the value of art have really been called into question, come into play in our world a lot more, and that those dynamic discussions between digital art and traditional art are where those intersections come into play are a lot more dynamic than they were before,
mm,
especially since 1990. Um, yeah, from what I saw in the last 30 years of art criticism in the art world, since 1990, it's sort of been a lot less dynamic, really, a lot less interesting to me. But in the last few years, I think the whole art landscape has uh, been ruptured, challenged, pushed, pulled, and is reforming into something completely different.
mm. Yeah, especially in our space, right, with what's happening with digital art. And why? What do you mean when you say it was more dynamic before 1990? What was the difference that you are seeing?
Well, I think, yeah, partly was the depth of writing and the philosophical perspectives that were taking, and how far they would go with their ideological searches. I think there was a lot that happened with the avant-garde, like in the 70s, and what sort of came to pass after that. That was, that basically made its way and proliferated and became an establishment within the institutions like museums. That was basically was supposed to be revolutionary at first, right? Like, there's been plenty of revolutionary movements in art, and the most recent one, say, that came out of the late '60s and has sort of just been progressing and becoming more of an establishment, has sort of taken hold and really sort of been cemented as a as an institution in itself, which was the very thing it was rallying against. There was a sense of anarchy to the avant-garde in the '60s that just became the establishment. And now the most sort of commercially viable kitsch stuff is what used to be avant-garde in its nature. Um, an artist like Jeff Koons, for instance, he sort of just became the joke. At first, what he was
Mm,
doing was a commentary, ironic, about commercialism and capitalism. But then eventually just became the thing it was
mm,
rallying against. Sorry,
yeah,
is that
yeah.
quite loud for you?
I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
Okay.
No worries.
Um, so those top selling artists in the traditional art world, I think, are are what used to be anarchistic and have now become the establishment. And
Mm,
where is beauty and all that? Has beauty been so far pushed into the corners um, of the museums and of the dialogue? And beauty and storytelling and those things that appeal to the human soul, the precious faculties of the human soul, so unimportant to us now, that, like, what is happening to our world in terms of culture? Like, will we allow ourselves to be um, sort of ideologically, artistically, and culturally dominated by capitalism in terms of you know um, what is being thrust upon us by corporations and the like? Is our mind so full of cereal boxes and billboards that we don't want to take control of our imaginations, take back control of our imaginations, for that to be something enlightening and invigorating to the human spirit, uh, and rather just sort of sink back into that iconography of, say, the mega visual tradition of billboards and advertising, and just say, yeah, this is just a part of our world. So let's just grab these symbols, let's just grab these aesthetics of pastiche pink and yellow, and just make that just a part of it. And hey, that's a commentary on the world that we live in. Okay, but is that I think that there's another commentary that could be made, um, which is about our potential as human beings, that our potential for what we could see in the world, one that's in tune with nature, one that's in tune with the imagination and the best parts of ourselves, that the best parts of our dreams, and what I mean. I'm gonna drift off into thinking about a poem that I'm writing if I keep talking about it, but um,
No, that's amazing. I mean, it's a very deep thoughts, and it invites us to reflect, right, on what's happening. And in the same line, Lawrence, what do you think about, because you've been in the digital art space since I believe early 2021, maybe before. I know you were one of the first artists on Hicket Nunc and collecting as well, and you have seen how everything has kind of moved or evolved over the years, the last 2 3 years. So, how do you feel about where we are right now in terms of the digital art space? Do you see opportunities there for artists that are taking this as a full-time profession? Do you see do you see it kind of a positive place? Do you think we are moving to somewhere better? What are your thoughts from comparing it to the early days and everything that has happened until today? What do you feel about?
so from you mean like the early days of Hiss Nunc and like early 2021
Yeah,
and
yes, and now and then the different platforms, the different marketplaces, the different exhibitions, galleries that are now in the space. Um, how is it now compared to when you started, for example?
I mean, we were kicking about around the first object for object, weren't we? And you know, all of that was just discovering art, a passion for art that was without agenda, that was just about seeking a connection and through art and communicating our ideas and learning about others. And it was interesting to watch that take root until it became, it kind of took off a bit, really, didn't it? Which was great to see, and there was such like a purity to them, that I don't know. That I guess I can see like with 01, they're doing like some similar stuff in terms of
Mm,
creating art for art, um, and it was really interesting to see that, to see how that quite passionate approach um, became something much more than it initially was. That was a strategy
mm,
that took off. It wasn't the only strategy. I mean, there were artists blowing up on Super Rare at the time, making huge sales as well. So that was a good strategy for them. I mean,
mm.
it was sort of a bit of both. It was like, um, going all in on art for art's sake and watching that blow up, and then watching, watching, I guess, what was considered the high end stuff um, take off in a completely different way. Um, but either way, I don't think that the passion for digital art has faded or been anywhere near affected as the, the collectibles and other
Mhm.
digital assets that we've seen in the last year and a half, that we've been living through a bear market, right? Is it? I don't know if it's has it been a year and a half or 2 years. I can't remember.
Si- Since you mean like the BFPs started to go down in value,
Yeah, well, the whole
or
market really.
yeah, yeah. So I think we're in 2023. To be honest, I think it was early 2022, so around 1 year and a half probably since it kind of started to go a bit down and the volume started to go down. I think the peak was towards September, November 2021. I
Yeah,
think that's yeah, I think that's correct in terms of the total volume, right? Um,
yeah.
so yeah, early 2022 started to go a bit down, I believe.
I mean, the only thing that's really been affected in I think in from where those that early hen days and that community, um, from where it started to like the peak of it, let's say, in terms of like it taking off to say in November 2021 to now, it has been the price of the token by which it's traded. I mean,
Mm,
uh, personally, a lot of stuff I was collecting then, and I guess I'm fortunate to be among that group, has it's increased in value in terms of the tokens, in terms of the price of how many Tezos people are paying for it, for instance. Just the
mm,
price of Tezos has
yeah.
gone way down. So, but that's,
Mm,
I mean, that's talking about market forces. But what I want to say about that, I think, is the resilience of, if you genuinely are there for the art, right, and you genuinely love and believe in the art, it's going to be way less affected in the bad times than any other reason that you could uh, collect anything, right? Um,
yeah.
an emotional connection to it, to a work of art, is going to survive um, a lot of bad things. Uh, it's much like anything in life, like relationships or um, things that we really value. We are willing to withstand some pain to see the other side, um, and to have loyalty to it. Um, and if we don't, if our motivations are anything else, then it gets kind of complicated, right? I feel like it's the
Yeah.
simplest approach, actually, is if you're collecting things and making things that you genuinely believe in. That is the easiest approach, in my opinion, or the simplest approach.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
then you don't really have to worry. You don't really have to worry about anything, right? If you are collecting things you really like, either because you want to have them in your collection or because you want to support artists, then doesn't really matter, right? What happens with the price?
yeah,
Um, and how does the market affects um, your art in any way, Lawrence, or you try to be completely disconnected on your creative process and what happens in the market?
yeah. I mean, you asked me a very interesting question about platforms too that I want to answer. But
Mm,
I think
yeah, please, please.
I think it's interesting to see Super Rare has onboarded a ton of new artists since the end of last year, as well, and
Hmm.
that opening up a lot of new voices too, um, which has sort of had a sort of leveling out effect, I think, of the hierarchy that used to exist. It used to be that the Tezos artists were very like scrappy, sort of very punk-esque and like the underdogs, and the
Yeah,
super rare artists were like the blue chip, sell for 100 ETH sort of. They were up
yeah,
they were up
yeah.
there, and we were down here, kind of thing, in terms of digital status. And now I
Hmm.
think that playing field has been leveled out quite a lot, um, and that's cool to see. It's becoming more about the art itself, and things like Manifold, where artists are in charge of their own contract, and it's sort of a platformless way of minting in a way. Um, I think all of those things have really actually progressed in a very positive way, and the diversity of platforms, all these things mean that an artist's own platform is the most important thing. Like each of our own
Hmm.
platforms is what matters. It's become more chain agnostic. It's become more sort of cross-platform, and the I think it being indicated that the value is in the artist's own career and the artist's own uh, that work of art that they've created, and that is what collectors are you know purchasing, is a work of art from that artist, and not a token from that platform.
Hmm.
Um, and the more things go that way, I think the more sense it's going to make to people from the outside too. Uh,
Hmm. Right, right. Because then it's more about the art and the artist, and not so much about learning how does this platform works, right? And what are the different mechanics that exist here? And okay, yeah, I didn't think about that previously, but you're right. It makes it much easier for outsiders to actually go for the art and the artist more than the platform. And do you think it's confusing for artists, Lawrence? new artist to understand all these
Yeah,
dynamics?
probably. I mean, it's confusing for me sometimes. I mean, I think it's, but also
Yeah.
I've had some. I want to say I've had some very good experiences working with different platforms out here. Like I just worked with MakersPlace, and they have a whole team that help you with the drop, and they care about the different aspects of it. They want it to do well. So they're also doing a lot of digital art installations around the world and gallery exhibitions, which takes a lot of effort, and we need people to organize those things and to set up those
Mm,
events and to put in that work. And so I definitely don't want to dismiss the value of a platform that's operating like a Web3 gallery. Um, and those options I think are really valuable, but not all platforms need to be that either. Like Manifold is kind of the opposite. Manifold's like, okay, here's the tools, and you do everything else,
mm,
which I think is great
yeah.
too. They all serve very different purposes, and weighing up where to drop and how to drop a piece, and is is almost like a just a big part of our lives as artists right now. I think is always like considering where is the best place to drop this piece, and how will the dynamics be, what will the collector base be, and all those things. That it's important because it's like a traditional artist figuring out how he wants to set up an exhibition. Um, and another consideration we have now, and this is happening more and more, is do we also want an exhibition? Do we want this to be an
Mm,
IRL exhibition that's hosted at a digital art venue? And will that be
mm-hmm,
immersive? Will that happen during a convention, an NFT art convention?
mm,
Will that happen will it be a digital installation at NFT NYC or NFC Lisbon or Art
mm,
Basel coming up? We got Art Basel in December.
mm-hmm,
Um, so yeah, I think so. You could look at it like it's confusing, or you could look at it like there's just a lot of options. And sometimes you just got to commit and just not really know if something's going to work. But as long as you believe in the art itself, right, and just commit to a
mm-hmm.
plan, then that's all you can do sometimes.
Right, right. And I mean, a question that is related to this, Lawrence. If you were starting today, or if you had a friend, an artist friend that is starting, what would be your recommendation? How should he or she start today in terms of what you just mentioned, like which platform should he or she use Manifold? If once he starts to get some traction, how to deal with these exhibitions, these IRL events? Should they try to get there? So, what will be your basic advice for artists that are starting in this world today?
Um, I think it would be the same advice as if I was talking to an artist of any medium or an actor
Hmm.
or a budding writer or filmmaker. And that would be to focus on your art first and foremost, and to make that as fully realized as possible. And because that's what will attract the people that you need to help you. All of these things we're talking about, collectors, platforms, other your peers, they're in your life because they're attracted to what you've created. And if you can make that as attractive as possible, then you'll
Mm,
bring in all sorts of people on this adventure. Um,
right,
yeah,
makes sense. It's like a magnet, right? It's similar to when I write, right? The good thing about writing, in my case, is different from poetry, but when I share news, when I share opinions, I kind of attract like-minded people,
yeah,
right? It's like a magnet to attract the readers, and it's the same for artists in a visual medium, right? Like just focus on your art, try to make the best you can, and eventually you will find your audience. So that makes a lot of sense. And Lawrence, we have been talking almost for an hour now, and we haven't mentioned some of your collections, some of your artwork, and this is a question I've asked other artists that came to the podcast, and it's a tricky one. It's not easy. So maybe for you it is. But what's the artwork or a collection that you have created that you are most proud of?
you're gonna ask me that?
I mean, you can mention multiple, but if you about that? Like, is there one that comes to your mind, like, immediately?
Um, I hate you. I see that. No, I think
Could be a collection, right? You have collections with many artworks, right? Like series. That's a way to pick a group of pieces.
yeah. I mean, there's one I'm working on right now. Actually, is that's an exhibition, and half of it's collaborations with Vincent, half of it's my solo work. It's going to be immersive and cinematic,
Mm,
and working with AI to expand how we tell stories um, poetically. That that has
mm,
been the most challenging thing I think I've worked on artistically, and it's been the most demanding thing, and I've been working on it for since the start of the year. Still remember having coffee in New York with Vincent about it, and back in April, and the first seeds of what that could be. I mean, we both have created triptychs that are like chapters in our lives, like three acts of our lives that are connected to the story of New York in a way, and our experiences in New York, and and, yeah, and I think that's been quite a precious thing for both of us. I know when I sent through the initial drafts, excuse me, the first edits to Vincent for his triptych, for what I created of the visuals, he came back with a ton of notes, and I was like, I got to start all over again. I got to like this, and um, so yeah, I mean, it's something we've been working on since April, and I'm excited to see how it unfolds and how we can work with like immersive cinematic spaces to elevate that story as well.
right.
Um, so it's the thing I'm working on right now. Um, I mean, yeah, I would like to think of also the my Eden's Afterburns, which was a dissolving painting with Ruben Fro, adapting
Mm,
Val Kilmer's poetry and my poetry into the story that we told with paintings by Henrikaau, Tania Rivilis, Goldcat, Jeremy Lipkin,
mm,
and Ksenia Buridanova, um, who were all, I mean, then, like very accomplished painters, and who are all now, you know, some of the most sort of popular artists in the space. Um, and we got to, transform these gorgeous paintings that they created into um, this environment that Ruben created. And, he did his thing with the dissolving paintings, which I think you're
mhm,
a big
mhm.
collector of his dissolving paintings too, right?
Yeah, I had some of his early works. Yeah, those were from the early days on Ticket Nunc, right?
Those were some of the what we considered the grails of uh of 50 nunc, yeah, and the grails on the Tezos blockchain. Um,
Mm,
and so I loved working with Ruben and being a part of that series. We've done three different dissolving painting projects now. I did a Whaler's Elegy with Ruben, and that was just with me and him.
mhm.
And then we did a collaboration with Heinrich and Vincent called Flood of the Soul, which was part of Poetics exhibition. And then we did this
Poetic.
the collaboration my Eden's Afterburn on Nifty Gateway with Val Kilmer and those painters I mentioned. That's so it's been really fun being a part of the dissolving painting series, and I think the history of it's really interesting and very tied to the community and the culture, and it was fun telling stories in that way. Um, I mean, the whole Poetics collection that I just mentioned as well was collaborations with a lot of my
Yeah.
peers and a lot of artists that I really, admire and look up to and follow and work with all the time. Uh, Obviously, Tania Rivilis. I think the piece with Tania kicked off the exhibition. The piece with Tania about Kilmer,
Mm,
bird poetry, and Val's Super Red Genesis with Michelle Petrelli. Um, and then we closed with the collaboration with Vincent and Heinrich and Ruben. And in between, it was collaborations with like the artists a lot of the artists that were really making strides from the early days, and of basically just a community. There was
Mm.
a lot of people that couldn't be included because I couldn't have an exhibition of like
Yeah, 100 artists.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
100, 200. Yeah,
But it was a lot of artists. It was like 25, 30 artists maybe that participated in
yeah,
Poetics.
yeah.
Uh, so
And you coordinated it, Lawrence. You were the main like coordinator of the whole exhibition,
yeah,
like inviting the artists and working with each of them independently. I mean, that's how long? Because I was looking at the collection today. Actually, I took some notes on the collabs you did, and I didn't. I mean, I didn't at the time when you were releasing those, I didn't see how many they were, right? There were so many, as you mentioned. And this takes a tremendous amount of time, right? To coordinate, to work together, to actually end up saying, like, okay, the piece is completed, right? And in your case, in these pieces, they are visual, but they also have the audio part, right? And they are like, in many cases, like small mini shorts, right? They move, they have like story. So how long did it take? To actually work on this whole poetics collection? Was like a whole year, or how long was
it was about 6 months. It was about
it?
6 months, and some of the pieces had been in works for longer than that. But um, and those that desire, that seed of a desire to work with another artist, um, could have been said to have gone back even longer. Um,
Mm,
and so, in some cases, that's really where peace comes out of. It's like the desire to collaborate with somebody. You see something in somebody's work. In my case, I see something poetic in their work, and
mm,
and something starts to take shape in my subconscious and in my notebooks, and then it sort of evolves from there. But the bringing it all together of poetics was about 6 months of work. I feel like for a full complete exhibition, it's about the time I need to bring something together. Um, one-off pieces can happen a lot quicker, or but it's funny. Even one-off pieces sometimes can take months.
mm.
For that I'm with them for months. This pieces I have now I'm working on that have been with me for a long time. But each piece has their own sort of organic evolution into
Mm-hmm.
how it comes into being. And the seeds of ideas that I still pick up from like 2 years ago, and I'll go back through my notebooks and see it. I'll be like, oh yeah, now is a great time to do this. Um, and so yeah, it has to come together organically, really. I, it's hard to it's hard because
To plan
it's
it.
hard to plan it, but reality does dictate deadlines. Like there was a definite start and end date to the Poetics exhibition that I needed to have everything done by, and that we all did.
Mm,
Like uh, I think of that series as well, False Prophets, which is just a just a, a wonderful tongue in cheek series that we did for the Poetics with Jenni Pasanen and
mm,
Tania Rivilis and Von Doyle and Alona One. And actually, the figure that Alona One created, his face ended up becoming the icon of the exhibition. Like when you see it, the collection. Um, and that was our first sort of statements about AI, actually. And that piece was a statement about. It was called False Prophets. Playing on the idea
mm.
that it was like fake art or
Yeah.
something. Uh,
Okay.
and um, yeah, and the way that came together in different group chats as well, working with each artist individually and then pulling them all together into a group chat, all the false prophets into one group chat. Once those pieces were developed to a certain point, getting all the artists from that series together to discuss, how it was coming together, how we were going to do the Twitter space, and how we were going to release it. Um, and I love collaborating with people in that way. It's great to have a team as well. It's great to have a team of
Mm-hmm.
people that you can rely on, that your peers, that that have your back, and that you have theirs, and the people that you really respect their work and they respect yours. It's a strong feeling. It's and we're tied by um, we're tied in the conviction of our imaginations and the realization of our imaginations out in the world. That is that's a beautiful thing to rally together around. Um, yeah, so just enjoy being a part of the culture.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had some experience with a blind gallery, right, working with artists and especially like group shows. And you're right, like also when there is this communication, right, between the artists and they are all part of something, and they can, either give feedback or support each other, give ideas. There is like a special vibe, right? It's like as you said, it's like a team, and yeah, you're all trying to push each other, right? Giving advice and you know selling online, selling the digital art can be very stressful, right? And it's a tough. The minting day, as we call it, can be tough, right? And it's much better to do it with a team than alone.
Mm.
And most artists are usually doing it alone, and it can be very stressful. So yeah, I can relate to the exhibition, and doing it with a group, with a team. And I think that's why many artists, and what you mentioned earlier about working with MakersPlace and working with Super Rare, how that also is very valuable to artists, right? Because their support on planning, on the marketing side, on helping you get the piece exposed and finally the selling. That's also very valuable to artists, right? The support from these professionals, and it's something you mentioned earlier. And Lawrence, you've been. I think we chatted from time to time, and you were sometimes sharing some artists. Actually, I have Helio Santos. Is a good friend of mine, and you recommended him through DMs.
Really good.
Um, yeah, you told me, hey, you should look at Helio. He's doing some great
Cool.
stuff, and I think it was the early days of AI, as you mentioned, and Helio was playing with AI early on. Um, you're somebody that is aware of what's happening. You look at other artists to collect yourself. So another tough question for you, Lawrence. If you had to mention or recommend three emerging artists that you really enjoy, that you are excited about, who will you say? Who will you mention?
Well, it's funny. Initially, one came to mind that I don't want to recommend yet because I want to keep him my secret for now. For now, because I'm planning a project with him, and I think he's just going to blow up. Um, so you can't have that one. But I'll give you Kopfgestaltung. Do you know him?
Okay.
He does the Chrome cinematic work.
Well, I think I haven't seen that. What's his name again?
Kopfgestaltung. It's
Okay.
Kopfgestal. Oh wait, Gest. Guess Gestaltung. Kopfgestaltung. And it's a German name. Um,
Okay. I'll look for him. And by the way, for people listening, either through the podcast or now in the recording, all these collections, all the artists that we're chatting about will be included in the description, right? So you will have the direct links to all the artists and collections. You can check the full description of the episode. And yeah, you were saying, Lawrence, the other two.
yeah, Kopf is a well, Kopf I've collaborated with a few times, and his cinematics are exceptional. I think he's one of the most underrated artists in our space. Um, and uh, but people are starting to take notice, so that's really interesting. Um, then I would recommend um, Ksenia Buridanova. Uh,
Okay.
she's a painter. Her surreal paintings are like, and, her imagination is incredible. But then the way she's able to execute it is like a Dutch golden age painter. Like everything, her precision, just the quality of her work is just unbelievable, unbelievable. And like she just did a Pepe, right, which is hilarious. And she did a noble Pepe,
Nice.
and it's absolutely blown up. Like it's got like I don't know 10,000 likes or something like that. And
Mm,
but she's not. She's an emerging artist. Like her following is quite small, or relatively. It's only a few thousand. I've collaborated with her a couple times now. She was a part of the Maiden's Afterburn exhibition, and just everything she
okay.
puts out has so much imagination in it, and she just takes you into another world completely. And I just love to see that. And it's really hard to choose the final one because there's like 30 people I want to mention. Yeah.
So many.
Um, and what defines emerging artists? Like, how would you define?
Look, emerging, that's why I think it's so used, because it could be somebody that is just starting, or it could be somebody that already has recognition, right? So it's very open, to be honest. Um, it's the whole range, I would say, of somebody that, it's as you said, has a few thousand followers, or somebody that it's already selling quite well. There is always a next step, a next level. So I mean, it's very very open,
Yeah,
Laurence,
I
the
mean,
definition.
most artists in Web3 are emerging. Uh, some are not, of course, but um, well, here's my logic. I've gone with a 3D cinematic artist. I've gone with a painter. So now I'll choose a sculptor.
Hmm.
Um, KX.
Okay,
Yeah,
KX.
you don't know KX either?
Uh,
Awesome,
I don't think so.
great.
I have to. I have to.
I'm very happy to recommend KX. But he's been doing, he's got this incredible voice as an artist. It's really distinct. But he's been creating these little vignettes and these like figurative sculptures that are so sort of his. You can see of his hand and his imagination, and that are um, that definitely transport you as well to another world. And I like fairy tales. Each one is like a fairy tale or an allegory, and so it's no surprise that we've collaborated. I think 3 or 4 times. Um, and another interesting aspect of his work is that he does. Yeah, you can get like a photograph of his sculpture, and the stuff that we've done has been cinematic animations of his sculpture. Um, but you can also get AR um, uh, versions of his sculpture that you can place in metaverse galleries and like walk around them, and
Mm,
that they're like fully interactive in 3D, and you can move the sculpture around like this. I think that'll be really valuable for the way that metaverses develop and metaverse exhibitions. That it's not just a still image on the wall,
hmm.
although that can be cool. Um, that it's this object that you can place in the center of an exhibition. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks so much. I'll look for them. I'll look for them, and I'll include the links in the description. I think you mentioned a very diverse set of artists. That's great. Um, So Lawrence, we've been talking for more than an hour now. It was great. It was a great chat. It was great to have an extended conversation. Thanks so much for all your knowledge and sharing your experience. Also, what's happening with the Hollywood strike, which I think is solved now. We'll see. And looking forward for your piece, man, with Vincent. I'll be waiting for that one. I think it's a series. You said right, so it's a series of
It's a
works.
series of work. We'll do an exhibition in New York, and that will have a component in LA and maybe London too. And it's coming up end of October. Yeah,
Okay, okay, it's almost here. Almost here.
one
Two
month.
months away. 2 months
I
away.
kind of wish it was 2 months, but it's 1 month.
Oh, Oh, I thought it
Yeah,
was November. I thought
yeah.
it was November. Okay, end of October. So 1 month away. Okay,
Wish
nice,
me luck.
fantastic, Lawrence.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Katie.
much. Thanks so much. Yeah, good luck. You don't need it. You don't need it. But yeah, good luck.
Always good to see you, man. I think the last time we saw each other was in New York, right?
I think
Oh,
New
you were
York,
listening to,
and
yeah, we
then
saw each other.
Lisbon
All right.
for the
Are you coming to
yeah.
Basel, Miami?
Yes, yes. Oof, I don't know. The thing is, my parents live in Miami, in Florida. So I used to visit them in December, but this year they're coming. They are coming to Spain. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I have to see. I have to see. I would like to. I would like to, but it depends on the dates they are coming and when exactly they will be here.
I'll
But
be
we'll
there.
see. Will
Yep.
you be there?
I've got three installations participating in three different exhibitions there.
Mm,
Yep.
awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Let's see if I can make it. Hopefully, I have to chat
Cool.
with my parents. Kind of
Hopefully.
schedule it the
Fingers
right
crossed.
way. All
All
right,
right, brother. Great to see
Lawrence.
you.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Enjoy the
Bye.
sun. Bye bye.